So in this series of evenings that runs up to the Sangha retreat at the end of this month, we are looking at the Heart Sutra and looking at what the Heart Sutra contains. By way of preparation for what will happen on the Sangha retreat, at which it will be revealed how the Heart Sutra takes all of these teachings and completely trashes them. Well, it doesn't trash them, but it exposes them for the limited and partial understandings of reality that they are, in a mysterious kind of way. So the Heart Sutra is a perfection of wisdom text. And the point of perfection of wisdom texts is that they are designed to stretch our rational understanding of the Dharma and reality to breaking point and beyond, to the point being that the conceptual rational mind can only take us so far in pursuit of understanding the Dharma. So the ultimate nature of reality of the Buddha's experience is beyond words and concepts. But of course we have to use words and concepts because that's what we've got. But we're using words and concepts to point beyond the meaning of words and concepts. So this is what the Heart Sutra does, the heart of perfect wisdom. So it lines up the teachings, which we know really well, many of us know pretty well, and knocks them down. It says, yes, but, I suppose you could say. So we've looked at the teaching of the 5 skandhas. So the 5 skandhas are the sort of psychophysical aspects of our being. So if you remember, Vajrapriya introduced that a few weeks back. So corporeality is sort of this body, this physical, this what thing I can experience physically, and all the sort of mental aspects of experience. So feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. So we looked at those. And then we looked at the rather formidably titled 18 dhatus. So the dhatus being the sense bases. So there being 6 senses in Buddhism as opposed to the normal 5. So we're all familiar with the normal 5, and Buddhism adds on the mind as a sense. Yeah. So the mind in its capacity as something which reaches out to and apprehends objects. So when the mind comes into contact with an idea or a memory or something of that sort, a thought, then it is acting as a sense. And we saw how consciousness links all of those senses to their objects. And in that session a couple of weeks back, I tried to sort of get us to look at our basic assumptions about perception and about the world out there and the world in here, and to sort of challenge them. So our basic view is that our understanding is that there are objects, there are real existing fixed objects out there with fixed, real, independent qualities of their own, and we just, as it were, passively sort of experience them through our senses. But we did a few things, and I was trying to show you that it's more the case, or at least in certain schools of Buddhism, that we our senses co-create the world. So our senses actually play a part in creating the objective world out there. Yeah. So we kind of meet and create what looks and feels like the objective reality with our senses. So that was the sense basis. And so we're coming on to another teaching. I'm just going to read out the relevant bit of the Heart Sutra. If I can find it. Here we are. So we've got rid of the skandhas. We've got rid of all of the sense bases. We've been through all of that. And then the Heart Sutra says this. It says, no ignorance or end of it, nor all that comes of ignorance, no withering, no death, no end of them. Yeah. So that's a reference to a teaching called the 12 Nidanas, or links of conditioned existence, which you find on the outer rim of the Wheel of Life, which I think are familiar to many of you. So I'm just going to bring up an image of the Wheel of Life so that you can see it. The people who, you know, I know Zoe was on my course recently, and we looked at this very image, so hopefully it's not too unfamiliar. So bear with me a sec. Let's do the technology. Share this, don't I, first? Sorry. Bear with me a sec. Not doing it. So the Wheel of Life is a mirror which shows us the workings of our mind, the workings of the unawakened mind. It shows us the processes that we go through. It shows us the greed, hatred, and delusion at the core, at the hub of the wheel, which drives our experience of suffering. And it shows the various psychological realms in which we can be born, as it were, which we can experience. And on the outer rim of the wheel, there are 12 segments, which are called the Nidanas. Now, Nidana means something like cause. Yeah, so these 12 Nidanas kind of give rise to one another. And what they are basically is they are the mechanics of suffering. They are the mechanism by which we suffer, by which unenlightened people suffer. And I'm going to go through them. And then we might come onto some actual examples of how this works in practice. So the text starts with no ignorance or end of it.
No ignorance
or end of it. I don't know why this isn't playing my actual slideshow. Is it not showing you? I'm having technical issues here. I should have known better. Beginning. I'm the wrong thing, that's probably why. I'm sharing the wrong screen, I suspect. To stop sharing and then I'll... What is going on? Okay, let me try that again. That's what I want. Let's see if I can share that. Yeah, but fine. Thank you. Well done, staying with me. So the process, the mechanics by which we suffer, the mechanics of samsara, of this realm of difficulty and suffering starts with ignorance. Okay. So before I go on to that, I should perhaps say that the Nidanas, which many of you will know, are divided into 3 sections across 3 lives. So we're starting by looking at the previous life. So, which is basically a kind of condensed version of the more extended middle part of the Nidanas, which is the present life. Anyway, we'll come to that. So the starting points of all of our problems and difficulties is ignorance. And so the image for ignorance is, well, it's somebody with their eyes closed. It's sometimes also shown as somebody with a blindfold, kind of tapping forward and trying to find their way. And so this symbolizes our kind of sort of relationship to the way things really are. Yeah, we can't see things as they really are. We're like blind people, kind of feeling our way forward, you know, well, in the dark, obviously. Yeah. So this is the sort of basic position that we find ourselves in. We're not seeing things as they really are. Yeah. We are not acting on the basis of proper and true information, you could say. Yeah. So ignorance is the sort of the starting point of the set of difficulties in which we find ourselves. And on the basis of ignorance, the second image shows a potter. He's making a pot. So what arises on the basis of ignorance is the karma formations, or the sanskaras. So on the basis of our ignorance, we behave in a certain way. So we create volitions. So we act in a certain way on the basis of particular mental states. And through those mental states, we shape our experience. We shape the contents of our life, just like a potter making a pot. So the potter is forming an object. And this is what we do on the basis of our underlying state of ignorance. Through the actions that we perform, we shape the experience and the quality of our lives. Okay? So this is the principle of karma. So if we act in a particular way, we have a particular experience. So from this sort of basic underlying state of ignorance, we shape our lives, and we shape our lives with all of their happinesses and unhappinesses, their joys and sorrows, the habit patterns that arise that inform the experience that we have. So basically, yeah, so on the basis of ignorance, you could say that habit arises. Yeah, so on the basis of the wrong information, we get into certain, usually unhelpful habits. So our understanding of reality might say, well, if I act in a certain way, if I acquire as many possessions as possible, or if I seek as much pleasure as possible, I will be happy. So that's the kind of underlying assumption. That's the ignorance, if you like. So we set about in our lives doing things that we think will make us happy through the acquisition of things, through setting up our lives in a particular way, so that we think we can ward off unhappiness and suffering forever. Yeah, and I don't know about you, but my experience tends to show that that doesn't work. Yeah, it doesn't work in the long term. It doesn't work permanently. Yeah, so we may be able to arrange life for a certain time in a way that does keep suffering at bay, but at some point, reality always asserts itself, and dukkha, suffering, come back to our lives. Yeah. So, yes, so we create our experience through our actions of will, our volitions, if you like. So, yeah, if I act habitually on the basis of selfishness, of greed, of ill will, then I will have a corresponding experience, which will not be a very pleasant one. Yeah, I will be a person who habitually acts on the basis of selfishness and ill will and greed. Yeah. And I'm sure we all have experiences of what it feels like when those are our predominant emotions. Yeah. So, yeah, we shape our lives on the basis of our ignorance, our fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of reality. Okay, so these first two links are, as it were, they are like a past life. Okay, so the wheel of life is actually spread over 3 lives, and if you quite reasonably have difficulties with the idea of past, present, and future lives, then I would say just go with this and sort of park the metaphysics of it. Don't worry about it too much. Yeah, the principle is one of conditionality, which I think holds good regardless of whether you actually believe in past or future lives. Anyway, so we live this life and we act in a certain way and we have a certain experience and we shape our character on the basis of how we act. And then our past life unfolds. And at the end of that life ends. So we die. And then what happens is thoroughly mysterious. And I don't think that the Buddhist teachings have ever really quite nailed what happens from one life to the next. And it's one of those difficult questions that one always gets asked, is what goes from one life to the next? Yeah. But the basic principle, well, what happens, at least in this teaching, is this. So after death, what then arises is what Bhante Sangharakshita describes as the relinking consciousness. So we go through the process of death, and whatever mysterious process of transference of being takes place. And based on our actions in the past life, there is a flash of consciousness that arises at the moment of conception, traditionally. So our life force, our consciousness, our volition, whatever it is, be it whatever it may, it finds expression in a new life at the point of conception. So for this to arise, you need conception to take place. So you need to have two copulating parents, and the consciousness or the stream of volition, or what it is from our past life, then finds expression in this. It takes root, or it's in this situation, and a flash of consciousness happens and a new being comes into being. Yeah. So it's not consciousness as in the way that we understand it normally. It's the first flash of consciousness that arises when a new life is created, when a new life begins at the point of conception. Now, this can be tricky, of course. There's been a lot of discussion about Roe versus Wade in the United States, hasn't there, about the move in the States potentially to make abortion illegal and the uproar that has caused. But traditional Buddhist teachings actually do tend to say that the new life begins at the point of conception. I mean, there's no way that can be proven, but it is the sort of orthodox teaching. So as soon as conception occurs, the flash of consciousness arises, and that signals the start of a new life. Again, I'm not going to, I don't know, I'm not going to pronounce on that or make a judgment, but that's what the tradition says.
Can I just ask what that
yes.
picture is?
It's a picture of a monkey, and that's a curious image for the flash of relinking consciousness, isn't it? But there is a couple of things you could say that the monkey's attention span is probably very short. So a monkey's moment of consciousness is maybe just a flash. And there's also the sense in which the monkey swings from tree to tree. So you could take that as an image of swinging from the last life to the next life. Yeah. Although we shouldn't get too bogged down in literal understandings about an entity going from one life to the next. But that is the traditional image which is used. Yeah. So I don't know, some of these images are a bit they're a bit idiosyncratic. I don't know where they came from, but they are the traditional images. So we have a flash of consciousness, and then what emerges, what arises then, is what you could call the psychophysical organism. So on the basis of that consciousness, life begins. And you could say this is like the early stage of gestation in the womb, for instance. So what arises from that initial spark of consciousness is a being which has a form, and it has a psychophysical form. So it has a form, and it also has mind and consciousness and the sense faculties. And the image here is a boat with 4 people in it, one of whom is steering. And that is the image of the 5 skandhas that we looked at a couple of weeks back. So the 5 skandhas appear again in this context. So on the basis of that flash of consciousness, the psychophysical organism starts to form. Okay, so you've got consciousness, which is steering the boat, and the boat itself is rupa, which is physical form, or the corporeality, as Vajrapaya described it. And the other 3 passengers in the boat are the other 3 sort of mental operations, so feeling, perception, and volition. Okay. And then you have an image of a house with 5 windows and a door. So the image of the house stands for the 6 consciousnesses. So they appear again as well. So on the basis of the psychophysical organism, you get consciousness. Okay. So the door is mind consciousness, and the 5 windows represent the other. The other consciousnesses, the normal 5 that we know. Okay, so on the basis of the psychophysical organism, you get these sense bases, the 5 senses plus consciousness. And this is where it starts to get kind of more immediately relevant. So what happens when the sense organs arise, when sense consciousness arises, is in this picture, it's contact. Okay, so this picture is of a couple in embrace, so they are in contact. Yeah, so we see objects, we hear sounds, we sense things with the body, we smell smells, odors, we taste tastes, yeah, and so forth. So what arises then is contact with the world out there, if you like. Yeah. So in order for that to arise, we need to have senses operating. Okay, so this is all well and good. Yeah. This is just a function of having a body with sense organs. And then you've got a picture of a man with an arrow in his eye. So who's having a particularly unpleasant experience, one could tell. And this is feeling. Yeah. So what arises when a sense organ meets a sense object? Feeling arises. Yeah. So if I drop a brick on my foot, for instance, an unpleasant feeling will arise. Not quite as unpleasant as the feeling of the guy with the arrow in his eye, but nonetheless unpleasant. Yeah. Or if I see, I don't know, I smell freshly brewed coffee or see a freshly baked cake in a shop window, a pleasant feeling arises. A pleasant Vedana arises in my experience. It's a pleasant experience. Okay? This is nothing that I am doing. I have no choice in the matter. Yeah, this is just something that happens. It's something that arises because I have a body, because I have sense organs, and those sense organs meet objects. So all of this, in a sense, is sort of passive. Yeah, this just happens because I've got a body. Okay, this is not my fault. I'm not responsible for having Vedana, for having feelings. Okay, they just go with the territory. Even the Buddha had Vedana. Even the Buddha had feelings. You know, the Buddha could experience pain, and he did frequently experience pain towards the end of his life. Yeah, so pain and pleasure are part of being embodied. Yeah, they're not a problem. They're not something we do. Yeah. But at this point, there's a fundamental shift happens, which is where it becomes crucial in our Dharma lives and in the mechanics of suffering. So we have a picture of a seated man being offered a drink by a woman. Okay, so this is the image of craving. Yeah. So on the basis of of a feeling that arises in my body, craving might arise. So I smell the freshly brewed coffee, and my impulse is to go and get some coffee. And when I've had that coffee, go and get another coffee. Yeah? So craving arises on the basis of that sense impression. Or if something unpleasant happens to me, I have I see an unpleasant thing, or I hear something I don't like, or somebody says something nasty to me, then my impulse will be to push it away, to respond with ill will, to respond with aversion. Yeah. So it covers both of those, but the image here is is restricted to craving. And you could, in a way, say that craving is the sort of basic issue, because ill will, in some ways could just be seen as craving that gets frustrated. Yeah. If I want something, but I can't have it because somebody's stopping me from having it, ill will arises. Yeah. Or there's somebody in my life who's really annoying me. I don't want them to be there because, they're stopping me from being happy, at least in my analysis. Ill will arises. Yeah. So craving and ill will are kind of two sides of the same coin, we could say. So this is where we start being responsible for what happens to us. This is where it passes from being passive, so receiving information through the senses, to being active. This is where we start doing stuff. This is where we start acting. Yeah, this is where we start having a choice. Yeah. So Vedana, feelings in the body or in the mind, are not a choice, but craving or aversion are choices. Okay, this is incredibly important, and I'm sure it's something you've all heard many, many times before, but we forget. Yeah, don't we? We forget that we have choices. We forget that craving is not automatic, but we forget that it's not somebody else's fault or somebody else's responsibility. Yeah? We forget that ill will is not, cannot be blamed on somebody else. Yeah? It can be triggered by somebody else, but it's not their fault. Yeah, the responsibility for our ill will, our craving, rests with us always, in all circumstances. Yeah. And we'll see what happens. So with craving. The next image is a girl picking fruit from a tree. So this represents grasping. So this is like the continuation of craving, if you like. So we're in an experience where we crave. Well, there's an impulse to do something for a particular object, to sort of, and the grasping, the next stage is when we actually go for it. Yeah. So grasping is like fulfilling the craving, I think you could say. Yeah. So it's all very well. Craving is one thing. You can just sit and crave and just experience craving. I mean, that is possible. I mean, it's hard. Goodness me, I know, from personal experience, and I'm sure we all do, that it's not easy. You can to sit in a state of craving and not to go with it, but there is a possibility. But the grasping is what happens when we go, right, I'm going to have that thing. Yeah, I'm going to do that thing. I'm going to have that coffee. I'm going to have that cake, or that second bar of chocolate, or that third pint, or whatever it is. Yeah, I'm going to act on my craving, and I'm going to kind of, sort of complete it, as it were. The problem is, of course, that it's never enough. Yeah, when craving goes to grasping, it's not as if the grasping satisfies the craving. The grasping feeds the craving, doesn't it? 9 times out of 10, it just makes it worse. It intensifies the craving by giving into it. Yeah. So grasping it sort of intensifies the situation and can intensify the pain and suffering that goes with it. Yeah. And through grasping, which is a sort of volition, it's something we choose to do, we shape our future life. Okay, so we have an image here of a pregnant woman with a young child, and that image symbolizes becoming. So what the craving and the grasping do is that they shape our future, they shape our character, they shape our future actions. They kind of shape the person we become. Yeah. So if you think back to the image of the potter, it's that kind of thing again. So through our actions, we mold the sort of person we become. Yeah. We cut grooves down which habits flow, if you see what I mean. Yeah. So as a response, as a result of habitual craving and grasping, we start to act in increasingly more habitual ways. Yeah, we cut pathways through our lives that become harder and harder to deviate from. Yeah, so if I habitually respond to a situation with selfishness, with craving, with ill will, then I simply increase the likelihood that I will do that in the future. So I become the kind of person who does that, who responds with ill will or responds with impatience. Yeah. But I also have the choice to respond in situations creatively. And if I do that, then I can create a positive momentum to becoming a person who responds with kindness, with patience, yeah, with fortitude, with whatever positive quality you might want to mention. Yeah. So the kind of person we become is in our own hands at any given moment. Yeah. Whether we go down the well-worn paths of habit through craving and grasping, or strike down new paths of creativity. Yeah. So that's the challenge. But the important principle here is that how we develop the kind of people we are is not completely random. Yeah. If you look back through your life, you might be able to find sort of life decisions and sort of habit patterns that have contributed to the kind of person you are now. Yeah. Those could be neutral. They can just be things that happen. There can be problematic things or things that we experience about ourselves as problematic that have arisen on the basis of past actions. Yeah. So we have become the kind of person we are on the basis of the actions that we choose to commit, on the basis of our responses, on the basis of whether we go down the path of craving and grasping. And so the consequence of becoming is that the whole thing happens all over again. Yes, that's right. I remember now. I was going to put in a picture about birth here, but mine was all blurry and I forgot. So you have to imagine in this white space that there is somebody in childbirth. Yeah. So as a result of becoming, basically a new life arises. So this is where, in technical terms, we leave the present life and go to a future life. So the kind of person we have become in this life informs the kind of the being that arises in dependence upon that in the next life. But you don't have to go, I don't think we have to think in terms of next life. We can just see this in operation in our own lives from 1 month, year, week, day to the next. We can see what kind of person, how we are molding our character as we go through life on the basis of the decisions that we make. And as day follows night, what follows on from becoming and birth is old age, sickness, and death. So you have the whole cycle repeats itself again in a future life. So those are the mechanics, if you like, of suffering, of samsara, particularly the bit in the middle. So I'll just to recap that. So we have senses. And on the basis of those senses, we have particular feeling experiences. This is pleasant. This is unpleasant. This is neutral. Yeah. And on the basis of those feeling experiences, craving can arise, or ill will can arise, and they often do. Yeah. I say they can because if you remember, we do have a choice. We do have a choice. Yeah. Not to respond to situations like that with craving or grasping. So craving follows. Grasping is the consummation of craving. It's the actions which kind of make the craving real, as it were, which then in turn shape our character. They shape the life. They shape our future being. Yeah, and then on the basis of that future being, we become that person. Yeah, and then the whole thing starts all over again. So that is the Nidana chain. That's the chain of conditionality. That the Heart Sutra will at some point go on to say, yes, but that is how we experience things. And that's how the mechanism works for us.